Hey everybody, welcome back to Reacteria. I'm so excited to get started on this one because today we're looking at another video from John and Jane, and this time they're going to try to debunk natural selection. Now, if you remember, the last time we saw John and Jane, they actually described natural selection and said that it makes sense and that it works and that it fits into their creationist model. So I am dying to know how they're going to disprove natural selection while also saying that natural selection works. But as always, before we get started, you know I gotta thank my patrons on Patreon because they're freaking awesome. Stay till the end of the video if you want to see a credits roll with all of their names on the screen. And also, the sponsor of today's video, NordVPN! With NordVPN, all of your internet data stays safe behind a wall of next-generation encryption. And with their strict no-logs policy, they don't track, collect, or share any of your private data. Because quite frankly, it's none of their business, and that's why you would get a VPN in the first place, is to stop other people from doing that. So how kind of them to guarantee that they don't do it either. Nord has over 5,400 servers in 59 countries, so you can enjoy the internet with no limits and no borders. That means that you can use their service to log on to places like Netflix through another country, which opens up a totally new world of possibilities because you can access new content that isn't available where you are. I'm always happy to be sponsored by Nord because it's a service that I actually use every day, and they give my subscribers amazing discounts. If you go to nordvpn.com/ValkaiLabs today, you're going to get a 2-year plan plus 1 additional month for free, all for just $3.35 a month. That's actually cheaper than their 1-year plan. So you get 2 years plus an extra free month for less than you would just pay for 1 year at regular price. That's legitimately great. Plus, the best part is, one single account allows you to connect up to 6 different devices. So every single internet connection in your whole house could be protected with just $3.35 a month. How cool is that? And to top it all off, they're throwing in a 30-day money-back guarantee. So you get your $3.35 back if you don't like it. So there's no reason to not try it out. If you want to know what a VPN is all about, if you want to take control of your internet privacy, just go to nordvpn.com/ValkaiLabs and get started. And speaking of getting started, let's jump into this video from John and Jane.
Is it just me, or is natural selection kind of blind when it comes to evolution? John! Where is he? Let's see here. Ooh. Messing with my privacy.
You know, Jane, if you're worried about privacy, you could always try NordVPN. Just go to nordvpn.com/ValkaiLabs and take control of your internet privacy today.
Huh?
Ow!
John? Are you okay?
Yeah, no, I'm fine.
Are you sure you're okay?
Yeah, no, I just got back from the eye doctors. They dilated my pupils. Getting here was a little dicey, but I'm starting to see a lot better now.
Then why are you talking to a coat rack?
I thought you were looking a little taller.
Ah. And it stopped being funny just like that. So this is what we're doing now. This is how we're going to start this video off. Just in case you were wondering, if they dilated his pupils, that wouldn't affect his vision in any way. All that means is that they used a medication, eye drops, to force his irises to contract and open up his pupils so that a doctor can basically look inside of his eyeballs. That's all that means. That doesn't mean that he's going to be bumping into stuff or confusing a person with a coat rack or not able to read his text messages or anything like that. All it means is that his eyes are behaving as if they're in a dark room at all times. So he's going to need to wear sunglasses to protect his eyes because normal amounts of light would be very painful and could potentially even damage his eyeball. So until that medication wears off and his eyes can respond to light normally, he needs to wear sunglasses. That's all that's happening there. That's all that means. So this is just more of Genesis apologetics continuing on their campaign to misrepresent the most basic concepts of science in order to prop up their ridiculous arguments, and now they're doing this whole campy bit about John not being able to see. And I get it. Like, I'm not trying to be a spoil sport here and try to just nitpick everything. I understand you can't see and you bump into something and it's funny. I get that. But the problem is they started this video by saying that natural selection is blind. And I will bet $1 million that throughout this video, they're going to keep calling back to that. Either by using the word blind as a continuing buzzword, or by like referring back to the concept of blindness to try to say that natural selection doesn't know what it's doing and can't possibly have a plan in mind. And they're using John as a prop to like kind of build this concept of the funny things that a blind thing would look like, what blindness makes you do. So they're just using visually impaired people as the butt of a joke to build their stupid argument that, you know, natural selection doesn't work. And it's just cheap, and it's lousy, and it's completely unnecessary, and it's a crappy way to start off this video. So, wow, that killed my mood. Man, let's see what's next.
I was gonna get your help deciding on what swatches to pick out, but I think this is a really bad time.
No. I can do it. Give me a try.
Yeah, case in point right there. If his pupils were dilated and he took off his sunglasses in a brightly lit room like that, that would be excruciating. So they have no idea how anything works, and they're just making a stupid, pointless joke. What's the point? You know, just what's the point of any of this?
We better get to studying.
What are we studying today?
Natural selection. I've already started reading it. There's a great definition in our biology textbook. So, natural selection is the process by which organisms with variation most suited to their local environment survive and leave more offspring.
So, evolutionary theory holds that natural selection is one of the forces that drives evolution?
How's that work?
Well, evolutionists say a mutation happens in the sex cells of a creature, and its offspring exhibits the resulting trait difference, like a new feather color or something. The trait can give it an advantage or a disadvantage. A beneficial mutation would cause it to become a little better at surviving in an environment than the non-mutants. So, its descendants, and thus the trait, eventually outnumber the others. Then the scenario repeats with another variation, supposedly driving evolution forward. But rather than this process producing just the varieties we see among animal kinds, they believe this process built those animals from completely different ones, and can eventually lead to one kind of animal turning into another.
And here in the biology textbook, they point out that the polar bear had the advantage as a predator in the snow because of its white coat. And it also shows that if you start with yellow and green grasshoppers, two different traits inherited from the parents, the green may outnumber the yellow in a green environment because they are harder for birds to see and catch.
In all fairness, that's a fairly decent explanation of natural selection. Like, if you were to take all of the supposedlies and believes and evolutionists out of there, that would be a pretty solid way to define natural selection. So, kind of a good job, you guys.
So, did the grasshoppers think through how other animals would avoid it if it looked more camouflage? Did it know how to genetically engineer itself to express those colors? Did a polar bear engineer its own white coat?
Damn it, John, I was just saying something nice about you.
No, but that's not what evolutionists believe. They think that these changes happen randomly in the DNA, influencing an individual's survivability. Evolution is a blind process, no offense.
Nah, you don't get to say no offense to the person who can very clearly see after you just got done making fun of blind people. Sorry, doesn't work that way, dude.
Intelligent choices supposedly have nothing to do with it.
Evolutionists believe natural selection figured out how to design an eye. But how? It would have to build and preserve over who knows how many generations, hundreds of complicated interacting eye parts, including proteins that were all useless until the whole package was eventually assembled.
No, it wouldn't. At all. I can't get too mad at this because this is a very, very common misunderstanding when we talk about the evolution of complex structures like eyeballs or limbs or whatever. Our eyes didn't evolve from nothing right to where they are today. They didn't have to build up all the complex muscles and proteins or whatever else that's in them and just store them until they would eventually be useful at some point. That makes no sense. The truth is, there have been several steps, several different kinds of eyeballs with slow transitions between them, all building up to the kind of eyes that we see today. And each and every one of those steps was a fully formed kind of eyeball. They were all useful, otherwise they wouldn't have evolved. They all served their own purpose, they all worked just fine for the organism that had them, and they slowly got a little bit better and a little bit more complex as time went on, and for that reason, they kept evolving that way. This is something that I've talked about countless times before because it's really not as complicated as people like to make it sound. You just start out with a patch of photosensitive cells. You can now tell the difference between light and shadow. If you put a little dent in that patch of photosensitive cells, this cup eye can now tell the direction that light is coming from. So that's a little bit better. And the deeper that cup is, and the more narrow the opening is, the more resolution you're going to get, the more definition on which direction light's coming in. So now you have this pinhole camera eye. And then you just slap on a lens or a cornea so you can focus the light coming in, and boom, you've got a complex eyeball. It's really not that difficult. It's just a step-by-step process that takes a long time. And we can still see every single one of those stages in living animals today. Because again, they are all useful. They are all fully formed eyes. So there was never a point where some half-ape creature had half of an eyeball and was just waiting for humans to evolve so it can finally see. That's just not how anything works.
How'd it know to engineer animals for flight? Or a navigation system so tiny it can fit in the head of a monarch butterfly, which is smaller than a pin.
Again, this is the problem with the whole irreducible complexity argument. You're looking at modern species with admittedly very complex and intricate systems and structures, and you're assuming that these things could only possibly work the exact way that they are, because they can only work the exact way they are in the current phase that they're in. And you're missing all of these other steps, all of these other fully formed, fully functional ways that these things operated, building up to the point where you're now observing them and they only work this way now. And so you're missing out on all of this beauty and all of this information, and you're just looking right here. And it kind of makes you think. You can imagine what the descendants of these species are going to look like millions of years in the future. And if you could see that, you would see that what we have now is a rudimentary form of whatever else is going to evolve, because life is always evolving. We haven't hit the peak. Every single time a species reproduces, it is evolving and it's getting more interesting and more exciting. It doesn't necessarily mean it's always getting more complex, but in cases like this, we're talking about complex systems, we have to remember that every single generation is the next step in evolution.
How'd it wire a human brain that's far more complicated than our best computers if it is a totally blind process with no goal or purpose in view?
You're right. Natural selection is just a process. It doesn't have a brain. It can't think or design. It had no foreknowledge of what it was trying to accomplish.
So what are you going to say when we do eventually build a computer that's far more complicated than our own brains? What then? Just because we haven't figured something out doesn't mean that it's magical. Evolution doesn't need any foreknowledge of what it's trying to build, because it isn't trying to build anything. It's just about what works in the moment, what helps any one individual survive and reproduce. Think about it like a pile of Legos, only some of the bricks have all the pegs shaved off and some of the bricks have all the holes filled in with glue. Only some of them are going to fit together properly. So if I just sit there and just one at a time pick a totally random Lego and try to stack it, and if it doesn't work, I toss it and grab another totally random Lego, eventually, by totally random picking, I would build a pretty big tower. And you could come along and say, aha, look, see, there must be some intelligent design here. They must have had a plan to build this beautiful tower, when really the tower is just an emergent property of the random process of just stacking whatever random brick I could and throwing away the ones that I couldn't. So for you to point at the tower as it is and assume that it's something special is ignoring everything that it was and everything that it could be. It's just totally myopic to look at life this way.
As the textbook points out, it favors a creature's overall ability to survive, but the actual changes are happening deep down in the creature on a microscopic level inside the genes.
That's because the genes are the end-all, beat-all determining factor for an organism's survival. You aren't going to get eyes or venom glands or blubber or limbs or wings or anything without the proper genes for it. So yes, you need these microscopic changes in order to build big macroscopic changes. How else do you expect it to work? Magic? Wait.
Wait. So you're saying that when certain individuals die, all their genes just go away?
Yes!
Meaning that natural selection has no power in selecting individual genes?
No!
Well, it can't see genes, just whole organisms. Kind of like me trying to help you pick out swatches that I can't even see.
You can freaking see, John!
Also, natural selection is supposed to mean survival of the fittest. But what if someone, nobody in particular, had their eyes dilated and was leaving when they knocked over the fish tank in the waiting room?
You didn't.
Anyway, if exactly half of them died because they didn't get them in the water, was it survival of the fittest?
No, it was survival of the luckiest.
Yeah, that's called a disturbance. You're not breaking any new ground here. A random event that kills random members of a population could have a variety of different effects or no effect at all. Especially if that event happens on a semi-regular basis at least, you could see noticeable ecological or even evolutionary results. Like imagine a beach that's full of boulders. The smallest boulders are going to roll all over the place every single time the tide comes in or out. The biggest boulders are going to stay right where they are and never move. Whereas the medium boulders are going to roll a little bit depending on the strength of the tide on any given day. They might move, they might not. You could expect the smaller boulders to be inhabited by fast-growing algae because they're getting rolled around all the time and they're getting turned over and the algae is getting killed off on a regular basis. Whereas the bigger boulders are going to be covered in slow-growing kelp and barnacles and things that need a more stable environment. And the medium boulders are either going to have a blend of all these different species or maybe a totally new species all on their own. This is niche partitioning as a result of intermittent disturbances. Survival of the luckiest causing predictable evolutionary effects. So ideally, any one of these species could grow on any of these boulders. So we would call that their fundamental niche. But in reality, because of the way that the tides work and because of the way the boulders move, they can only grow in certain areas. So we call that their realized niche. Just because you aren't studying this doesn't mean that it isn't being studied, dude.
Yeah, well, here's a picture of two mutant flies and a normal one. Which one do you think is the most likely to survive in a particular environment?
None of them. When I hit him with my fly swatter. All right. The normal one would probably survive best. But it depends on the environment, right?
Yeah. So evolution that turns a simpler organism into a fruit fly relies on mutants becoming better able to survive as new genetic information is added, and then surviving to pass their genes onward. Mutants are usually worse off since most mutations are harmful, and natural selection actually cleanses the population by killing the less fit mutants.
Two things. One, they're lying. As we've talked about several times before on this show, every single time DNA is copied, there's a big chance for mutation. There's copy errors all the time, and those could do nothing, or they could be beneficial, or they could be deleterious. So their argument here that they keep making that mutations are bad, or even that most mutations are bad, is complete nonsense. Every single person watching this has, on average, around 200 to 300 unique mutations. So their use of the word mutants as if it's something that means like diseased, malformed, whatever that needs to be like purged from the gene pool is not only scientifically inaccurate, it's also pretty freaking gross. Which brings me to my next point. Maybe we shouldn't be throwing around words like cleanse from the population, especially when we're talking about genes. It's kind of an unpleasant history with that sort of language.
This might help keep the most effective traits within a population.
So the real world works exactly opposite of what evolution requires.
Bingo.
No, it doesn't. The worst traits are removed and the best traits stay. That's what you just said. That's natural selection. That's how evolution works. I'm seeing a trend with so many of these videos. They keep defining evolution and then saying, but that's not evolution. And it's like they can't escape reality anymore. But if they can just convince enough people that blood isn't red, it's crimson, then we'll be having a totally different, pointless conversation until we all just get so frustrated that we forget what we're talking about and just go our separate ways.
And while lots of small mutations can give a survival advantage in specific environments, virtually all the real-life examples show a loss of genetic information, not a gain.
There again! John just admitted that evolution works again. Play that back.
And while lots of small mutations can give a survival advantage in specific environments,
lots of small mutations can give a survival advantage in specific environments. That's how evolution works. That's the whole point of evolution. This video is literally saying, I know animals evolve, they just don't evolve. What are we doing?
evolutionists have tried to propose various genetic explanations, like gene duplication, but they're putting their faith in a process that has never actually been observed.
We have observed gene duplication and lots of other genetic mechanisms for evolution. We've observed them countless times. I have observed them in cell bio and microbio and genetics labs all throughout my college career. When was the last time that you observed the creation of a human from dust or a rib, John?
What's gene duplication?
It's when a whole gene accidentally gets copied and then it mutates to become another new gene.
Nice story. Have scientists ever seen that happen?
Nope, never.
It's literally how PCR tests work. PCR stands for polymerase chain reaction, and it results in gene amplification, which is a term for when a gene is duplicated so much that you can't even keep track of it. It duplicates hundreds or thousands of times. And I've run so many PCR tests, I could do it in my sleep. Now, granted, PCR is something that's done under like laboratory conditions, so you could argue that that's not something that happens in nature. But just for funsies, I just searched Google Scholar for gene duplication, and I found this completely random, just one of the top ones that came up. This is a study from 2012, published in the journal Science, which is one of the most prestigious science journals in the world, about how evolution, by way of several mechanisms, including duplication, was observed in real time in Salmonella bacteria. It literally took me under 1 minute to find this. Is that the problem? Did John and Jane just not have access to Google Scholar?
And most examples of supposed evolution in action involve things like chemical pathways and small changes in proteins, but how do you get a fin to turn into a limb and then a human hand?
Oh, that's an easy one. It's through chemical pathways and small changes in proteins. I dare you to define what a Hox gene is, John.
They tell interesting stories about how it must have just happened, but I can't find any evidence it actually happened.
So, just so we're clear, you do not believe in a process that we can all literally watch happening with our own eyes, because the countless, well-documented, direct observations of genetic changes in response to selection pressures, both in the laboratory and out in the field, are just not sufficient evidence for you. But you do believe in a supernatural entity that exists outside of the confines of space and time that created all life on this planet exactly as it is, just like that. Because you read about it in a book once. Got it. Makes total sense.
So, a typical mutation removes information, but only a mutation that can add information really explain how philosophers came from fish.
And if you think about it, natural selection can't create anything. It can only deselect by killing whole individuals with traits that are already present in a population.
Wow, you're right. You can only select something that is already present. how could nature ever add information to some DNA by subtracting some of what is already there?
But you just explained that. You said a typical mutation removes information, which no, it doesn't, but whatever. That would mean that other mutations add information, right? You literally just said some mutations add information, but where does the information come from? Like, did you not think that we were going to listen to the whole sentence?
Great question. And speaking of information, here's another question evolutionists have not even come close to answering. How could chemicals from early Earth spontaneously form molecules with information?
That's the first question you've asked that's actually a question. And the answer is easy as crap. It's called chemical evolution, and you can do it in a jar. Simple, naturally occurring molecules self-assemble into complex organic molecules under remarkably mundane conditions with impressive regularity all the time. We've found amino acids on asteroids in space. What, did your god start making life up there too, but he forgot what he was doing halfway through and gave up? Or did that one come to kill the dinosaurs as well, and it just bounced off of Earth and took a little bit of organic matter with it? This is the most frustrating part of these John and Jane videos. Just because you can ask a question doesn't mean that there isn't an answer.
But the biggest problem I have with natural selection being able to create new kinds of animals is found right here in our biology textbook. Let me see if I can find it.
But how will you be able to find it if you can't see, John?
So, natural selection has no intelligence and can't even select what's happening on the genetic level. It can only subtract from what is already present in DNA, and it relies on death to create new kinds of life. Wow. You know, I'm really starting to see that natural selection really doesn't have the power that evolution needs, you know, to turn fish into apes and then people.
Kind of makes you think, doesn't it?
I really wish that anything at all could make the two of you think, but I just don't have high hopes for it. Overall, I give this video a science teacher challenge level 1 out of 10. This is their worst one yet. They didn't ask any fun or interesting questions. They didn't bring up any new or exciting points. They tried to debunk evolution by defining it like 8 different times. Also, I'm probably going to cut out that whole obnoxious sermon there at the end, but they did manage to squeeze this little gem right into the middle of it.
How would you define religion?
I know this from class. It's basically defined as a system of beliefs.
Right, so would evolution qualify as a religion?
Because, you know, faith and belief and religion are all bad things, except when they're specifically in reference to young Earth creationism. Honestly, this is just the laziest argument of them all. They really can't see past their own nose to realize how quickly that's going to bite them in the butt, because when they try to pull science down to their level and say that it takes faith and it doesn't have enough evidence and that it's just another religion, what they're arguing is that faith is a bad thing and that a religion can be easily dismissed and that evidence is what's important. And I agree with them on all of those points. But once they realize that science doesn't require faith and that it does have evidence and that it's the farthest thing from a religion, at the end of the day, all they're doing is speaking ill of their own position. So I guess, thanks for doing a little bit of my work for me. I'm not sharing any of my ad revenue with you. And with that, I'm Forrest Valkai. Thank you so much for watching, for liking, for commenting, for subscribing, and all the other stuff that you do here on YouTube. Please exit through the gift shop on your way out. Pick up one of these sweet t-shirts. If you like terrible podcasts, I've got one of those linked down below as well. Have an awesome rest of your day, and never stop learning. Bye-bye.